your age. But I say that as an indicator of experience and talent, as opposed to anything else. And she's also a celebrated teacher. She teaches art at Bishop O'Dowd High School, and she's been there for 17 years.
17 years, guys. And guess who else taught there? You're never gonna guess. Are you ready? Gene Yang.
Yeah, we feel a special connection this year because I taught at Bishop O'Dowd for 17 years before I left. I taught computer science, and then this is Briana Loewinson's 17th year.
Yeah, I'm. What we're learning is I'm gonna stay there a lot longer than you.
Yeah, and Briana is seriously beloved at that school. Almost to like a disgusting degree, right? She almost has like a cult following where young people want to hang out with her all the time.
Agreed. Yeah. Aww. That's one of my students. No.
I want to start with a very small story about when we first met.
Exciting.
So we met in the mid-aughts.
Agreed.
You came to the Bay Area. You somehow found your way to Art Night, which is this gathering that we used to have every week of Bay Area cartoonists. And eventually you got plugged into Bishop O'Dowd by our mutual friend, sometimes enemy, Tim Pham.
Yes.
And I remember at Bishop O'Dowd, after you started teaching there, we got to know each other. And one of the first conversations we had was about consumption. Not consumption in terms of using resources.
Food or media.
Yeah. So can you explain what consumption is?
So consumption is also really more popularly known as tuberculosis.
Yes.
You want to tell?
You can go on. Go on.
Well, when I was a little girl, my dream was to be dying of consumption in an attic. And I would be laying on the bed, wasting away, coughing blood into a little hanky. You all would be here, so sad that I was dying, and I'm gonna be okay. And that was, I guess, one of the first stories that I had told Gene, and he just told me that earlier tonight. I don't know a lot of you guys.
And you ended the story by going, "How romantic." And then I thought, this lady is a little weird in mostly a good way. But I do think that that story shows your sense of humor. It also shows that you read books when you were little. And it shows that you have a tendency towards, I would say, an unusual and creative way of looking at the world.
Oh. Thanks, Gene Yang.
So I wanna start by actually getting an origin story. So I'm a comic book guy. Comic book people love origin stories.
Love it.
What is the origin story of Briana Loewinsohn as an artist?
Okay. All right. I would say a lot of it is the way I was raised was by hippies, and these were not hippies they drove a Prius and ate granola. They were I'm gonna do my thing, you do your thing, whether that's drawing pictures or eating bleach, I don't really care. We're all free spirits here. So that also meant that we had a lot of cool, weird stuff in our house all the time. So that was really actually very inspiring to me. It was having time by myself and having a lot of cool stuff to look at and having no one know what I was doing. And then as a little kid, my dad read me comics for bedtime instead of these beautiful, awesome books that they have here that everyone should look through, or the books that I read to my kids. My dad would read me Calvin and Hobbes, and he would read me Linda Berry used to have a weekly strip, and he would read me these old comics from the 30s, and I just really loved comics. When you were sick, you got a ginger ale and an Archie comic. So comics are a big thing for me growing up in terms of that. And then it was just a way that I could entertain myself because we didn't have a lot of screens back then. So that was sort of how I started getting into just drawing and why comics were such a big deal to me. And then art was always just something that I enjoyed, and I wasn't actually really, I wasn't a natural, some kids are so good immediately out the gate, and I had to work really hard at it. So that was sort of a challenge that I enjoyed. There were many challenges I didn't enjoy, but I would just work at it all the time, and mostly I would just copy cartoons and try to figure out how to draw them. And that's how I first got into art. And then I went to the Richmond Art Center and took classes there as a little girl, and my teacher is still an art teacher there, and we're still in touch, and I send her a Valentine's Day card every year. It's very cute. She's 100,000 years old. And I volunteered there in high school, and then I went to art school, and I studied art.
So you knew that you wanted to study art?
Yeah, I was like
pretty
very
early.
into art. Yeah, I was very into art, and I liked volunteering at the art center. So it was sort of like teaching and art was like already kind of going hand in hand. And then when I was in art school, I was always getting in trouble in my critiques because my work was too narrative. They kept wanting me to do like fine art, and I was just like, but I want to tell a story. And then at some point in college, I was like, I could just draw a comic. So that's when I started drawing comics. Was kind of through just like my desire to tell stories and be narrative, and also kind of out of laziness, because like oil paints, you have to like set up a whole thing and it takes so long and it's like so much work and there's so much stuff. Whereas comics, you just need like a pen and paper.
wait. Okay, but you do need a lot of oil and all that setup for an oil painting.
Yeah.
But you just do one square of an image.
Yeah.
Whereas in comics, you do like a billion squares of images.
Yeah, that's the lazy. I'm not that type of lazy.
You're okay.
I'm
okay.
lazy. Like if like I'm happy to do it. Like work so hard, but I don't really want to move.
Okay.
And I feel like comics is like perfect for that, because I'll spend like all day and all night. Like my family knows. Like I'll be waking up in the morning. My husband will come down. I'll still be drawing, and then like I work all day, and then I come home and I'm like still trying to finish the panel, and then at night I'm like passing out at 8:30, but I don't really have to like go very many places or find anything.
So what you're describing now is a young woman who did read a lot of comics. It sounds like it was mostly newspaper comics.
I would say newspaper comics, and then in my teen years, then I found indie comics. So it was like Daniel Klaus and Adrian Tomine and Julie Duché and like any of the indie comics that I could find. I know that I'm not a true nerd like you, because I did not read a lot of superhero comics.
There are different kinds of nerds. You were clearly a certain kind of nerd.
Yeah, I was busy dying of consumption.
Yeah, that's right.
I had a lot of work to do on that. So I read a lot of indie comics, like a lot of Mad Magazine, like, and my mom worked at like a underground comic store in like the hippie era, like
wow.
A lot of like real dirty comics were in my house, like Art Crumb and stuff like that. So
wow.
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's amazing.
Yeah. It was called Phoenix. It was like a underground comic shop. I think it was on like College Avenue.
So it was like part of your family then. That comics were kind of part of your family.
Yeah.
Not necessarily superhero comics, but everything else.
Yeah, like all the other stuff.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, so that's sort of your origin story.
Yeah.
You grew up in a house full of comics, a house full of weird stuff. You were drawn to narrative storytelling.
Yes.
What were some of the first comics that you did as a cartoonist? Do you remember?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The very first comic I did was about a breakup with a boyfriend. Very feminist of me. No, but it was like the first time I ever did a linear narrative story, but like I kept, was interested in indie comics, so I tried to like break the mold of how it was done. So some of the panels like went in like a circle, and some were like you had to read in a different direction or something like that. So that was like the first comic I did, and then I just started like I really enjoyed that. And I was like, oh, this is what I'm gonna be doing. So I did like I would just do it about like the job, like my work study jobs when I was in college. I would do little work study comics.
So it was mostly about your life.
It was mostly about my life, like in college, and then once I got out of college, like I've made like a bunch of mini comics, and none of those were autobiographical. Those were all just sort of weird, surreal little stories. I think at some point I heard like everyone does autobio first, so I was like, well, I'm not going to, like, even though I already had. So then I was like, I'm not going to do anything autobiographical. So those are a lot of just like really like whimsical, always probably pretty sad. Surreal little stories.
Now, I do think that a lot of us in comics, we tend to struggle with low self-esteem. Mm-hmm. Do you think that's a true thing?
Yeah.
And then in some ways, our artwork is sort of working through those things. Do you feel like you had some of that, like especially when you were writing from your own life?
Yeah, I feel like in terms of low self-esteem, I think that it's kind of both though, because it's like you have to have a certain amount of self-esteem to be like, I'm going to put this out there and people should look at it. So I feel it's like a two-sided coin. Like you could write like I'm the biggest dum-dum, but like if you're writing it and putting it out there, that means you think people should see it. So I kind of see it both ways. So I guess there's definitely like working out issues of like insecurities and things like that.
Yeah, and you felt like that was part of it. That was part of it for you.
In the early comics, I don't think it was insecurities. I think I was interested in just trying to do something different that I hadn't seen, even if someone else was doing it. Just trying to like try out new things. I guess I was really into experimenting with different comic ideas.
The reason why I asked that is because I've read Ephemera, your most recent graphic novel, many, many times. And maybe low self-esteem is not necessarily the right word, but it almost feels like, I think you're describing it right. It's like you're talking about a source of an insecurity, but you're doing it from a very secure place.
Yeah,
right? That's what it felt like.
Yeah, it's like a very vulnerable. I think I write about for me they're very vulnerable topics, and this is a way to be confident about them and to codify them and to look at them and see them outside of my head in a different way.
Yeah. So for those of us who have not read Ephemera many, many, many times, how would you describe it?
So Ephemera is amazing. No, it is a memoir, but it is not a memoir. Like, it doesn't look like me. So any of the images that are from comics here, they're not. It's not like what I look like. I grew up in the 80s and 90s in East Bay. So it's a memoir, but I wanted it to feel a little bit more universal, and I didn't want to feel tied to specifics. I felt like if it looked like me, or it looked like my mom, or it looked like my sibling, I would get too caught up in the specifics of it, like that's not how their hair fell across their face, or something like that. So I wanted to take it totally outside of that need to keep it accurate. So it's this sort of like dreamy memoir that is all about the feelings that I had. So some of the events, like most of the events actually happened and are like literal events. They just look different than how it was. Like the areas I grew up in were like not beautiful wonderlands of like forests and flowers. They were like crappy Emeryville in 1984. That was just like warehouses. But if you have crazy hippie parents, you could just wander around, do whatever you want. So that's what it felt like to me. So a lot of it is just like about a memoir trying to show you the feelings. And then it's about dealing with a parent with pretty severe mental illnesses that some were diagnosed, some were not. And just the hazy memory of childhood and trying to like understand and grapple like what happened and try and think about that.
Did you ever consider telling the story as pure prose?
Yeah, I write a lot of prose to myself when I write books, so there is a lot written down. But I don't feel as confident in my writing skills as I do in my comic skills, so.
That's pretty good, dude. I thought you did pretty good.
Well, there are very few words, so thank you.
No, that's why I asked, because I feel like you do have a lyricism to the way you do words. Mm. So what made you add the pictures? Was it simply because you're also a visual artist, or was there something more to it?
It's more that I like wanted to tell it visually, but had to put in words because I was like, ugh, I feel like this is going to be better if it has some words in it. Like I write in my head, ideally, like with no words. Like I really like to depict everything visually. But in my like process of creating comics, it's like very, very organic. Like I'll make like 7 Google Docs. One will be like a list of like flowers. One will be like a narrative of like literally just descriptions of like my mom or like a house we lived in, and they just have all these. So I have all these different ideas going on, and then I can just like pull from things and kind of like plug them in where I need them. So a lot of that is prose. They're for my eyes only, guys.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. Okay, so you use prose to kind of organize your thoughts.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the end product.
Yeah, but it's very disorganized. But I like images. That. I like things to be disorganized in a way that is aesthetically pleasing.
But your book is not that disorganized.
Yeah, I know, it's really good.
So how do you move from disorganization to organization?
I know, we're like the opposite. Like Gene Yang is so crazy.
This is not about me, this is
That's
about
okay,
us.
I'm just gonna put 1 second. Gene is so crazy and organized. Like my understanding of how he writes is he writes everything on a tiny little post-it, and then he puts it on his wall, and he's just like rearranging these little post-its like is that right?
Yes.
Yes.
That is right.
That is not
you should try it. I'm gonna buy you some post-its.
No,
next time.
I tried it, and I felt immediately crazy. I felt like so uncomfortable. I like to have like so many options to choose from, so I tried to make like the visuals that you can semi-see here is sort of more the way that I write. So like I have a sketchbook where I can sketch anything that I want because there's no pressure if it's not good and I'm not going to use it. And then there's photographs of things that inspire me. So So there's like houses I lived in, there's plants from my yard, and then there's sketches. So like I'll take the character or I'll take the place or I'll take plants and I just do a bunch of sketches and panels really that might never end up in the book just to like work out my ideas. And then as I'm writing, I'll be like, I need something here. And I go through all my millions of things and I'm like, oh, that's perfect. And I like plug it in. So I just like basically create this like big like salad of things that I can like pull from to put in the right order to create like a larger story.
So that's your secret to moving from disorganization to organization.
Don't tell anyone, you guys.
Is you have a salad of stuff,
I have a salad
and then
of
you
stuff.
slowly pick stuff.
Yeah,
and then you put it into an organization scheme, right? So, for example, in that book, it actually is organized around this idea of gardening.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you organize the chapters around what a plant needs in order to thrive.
Yeah.
So, how did you arrive at gardening as your
It's going to be a terrible answer. I just really, really love plants.
That's not a terrible answer.
And
Why is that a terrible answer?
really, really love drawing them. And I was just like, well, what do I want to do? I want to write about my mom and I want to draw plants. And so my mom is a terrible gardener. She tried to have one garden. It was a nightmare. She like one day planted a bunch of stuff and then never did anything again and was forever mad about it. And it was like, that's not how you garden. So she was not a gardener, but my mom was in AA, and so she had all these sponsors. Like as a child, I would just sit and listen to her, talk to her sponsees and give advice, and she was incredible at it. She like saved people's lives. Like she was so good at this one thing. And I would just like sit there because you just had a phone and you just sit on your mom's lap waiting for her to like pay attention to you. Or not on her lap, like nearby, listening. And so it's sort of a metaphor for that she had all these like awesome skills. She just couldn't like do it as a parent quite as well. She could give it to like these anonymous people, but just not to her kids. So the plants are sort of like an analogy for that, is trying to understand these things that she was good at. And the things that I did take away from her that were very powerful and helped me as a human that I would like to bring to the world. And that are just these beautiful things that could be hurtful in the way that she showed them to me and my sibling, but were so beautiful to so many other people. That makes sense.
That makes sense.
Okay, great.
So the book is about your relationship with your mom.
Yeah.
But it's told. So the main character is a child for much of the book, but I do feel like it has like an adult's wisdom. It's not a kid's book, right? It's an adult book. So
it's an adult, but not an adult book. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you actually have to, like as an artist, you actually have to access yourself as a daughter.
Right.
And you also have to access yourself as a mom,
Yeah.
because you're a mom of 2 kids.
Yeah.
So how do you feel like those 2 roles kind of played into
that was interesting. Yeah. So like as a kid, what I miss about being a kid is like not being in charge and thinking someone else was in charge. That's what I miss. I just want someone to like plan everything and just like food arrives and there's clothes in my drawers. I don't know how things happen, like I miss that. But when I think back to my childhood, I also think back to like, my mom was taken away for a while because she had mental collapses and she had a lot of health issues that would like come up and then go away. And then, so as a child, I just like didn't understand what was happening. So trying to understand like that as a child, like why are these things happening? I don't get it. But I think everything's cool. It seems good, right? And then it's just like, I don't understand. So that's what a lot of it is about, that just like total confusion as a child. And then as a mom, it's also, it's really interesting looking at my own kids and thinking about what they're seeing, what they think is normal, or what might be confusing to them, or what they might look back on.
Did you try to access your kids' perspectives in any way to tell the books, or do you feel like it's primarily?
Yeah, it's really, they just have it so good. I just. I don't feel like I access that much, other than there are some pictures here where you'll see where Jane, my daughter, did pose for almost every one of the panels, because she was at the time 8 or 9, and that's like about the age I was shooting for. So literally, I accessed my child because I made her pose for pictures. She was very grumpy about it. I guess a little bit sometimes, my son he's very emotional and he'll get very sad about things and because he doesn't get what's happening, or he'll think like if I'm going away for one night, that means he kind of feels like he's never going to see me again. So like a little bit that type of thing I can like empathize with.
But it does sound like overall the house that your kids are growing up in is very different from the house that you grew up in.
I would agree with that statement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, just from a perspective of being outside of that house, that's how it looks to me too.
Yes.
Okay, so we talked about how your role as a daughter and then your role as a mom affects how you are as an artist. There's this other giant role in your life, and that's as a teacher. Do you feel like being a teacher also affects you as an artist?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really fortunate to be an art teacher. I teach high school art. I teach painting and drawing and AP art, which is cool because kids can use any medium they want. And so that is really inspirational because I just work alongside my students. And so it kind of like keeps me going in terms of the excitement that they have for creating art. It's like so infectious to be around. And it really makes me critical of my own work because I'm so critical of their work in a super positive and loving way.
That's why she's so popular. She's super positive. Like even if she gives you a critique, you'll like feel good about it.
I know. I am very motherly and a little bit judgmental to them. But as a teacher, yeah, I mean, it just keeps me really like focusing in the game kind of just because I'm around people creating art like all day, every day. So it's great. And then I think about my students too, and I think of like there's some like things I didn't put in the book because I was like, I'm a teacher, I'm a pretty public person in that world, and I'm not gonna like put this in the book. So there were some things with that too.
Do you feel like those choices hinder the story at all, or do you feel like they actually underline?
I think they actually made it better. Like part of the goal of the book, I do really like the idea of ambiguity, and all of my books have sort of like ambiguous parts to them. And so I think the fewer details, almost the more relatable it can be. So the feelings that I was trying to convey are like not super specific, where you'd be like, oh wow, that never happened. I tried to convey not universal because not of course that's impossible, but like much more broadly felt feelings that children might have or that adults might have about their parents. And that was another big thing, is that a lot of my feelings changed as an adult towards my parents.
What way?
Well, I just bought it. I bought in. Like I bought into the whole shtick until I was like maybe in my 20s. I was like, yeah, everything they're doing is great. And then at some point I was like, whoa, this is not what, there's other ways that life can be. This is crazy. And they also, that's when everything, they really fell apart. And so they changed. And so it was a lot about, as an adult, having that loss where I thought I had stability, but I don't. And then it had also happened as a child. I thought I had stability, but I didn't. And so a lot of it is that sort of like those, that's why it's told from a child and an adult. And they're like both having these like feelings and trying to recognize that it can be both. Like there were terrible things and there were great things in this house.
One of the things I was most impressed with in the book is how you use color. So you're very, very deliberate about how you color the scenes and then where you place the color physically on the page and the meaning behind the color. So can you talk a little bit about that? Yeah, so
the book goes back and forth between sort of like present day. It's all set, it looks sort of like 40s-ish, which is not when I grew up. You guys, I did not get a lot of work done. So it's sort of sad. Like present day are like all these like warm, rusty tones. And for me, those are like comforting colors. Like I am a warm colored person. Like I love the color yellow. I just like, warm colors make me feel really good and really safe. So I made the like present day in these like rusty tones. And then the past to me, like I sometimes feel like I literally couldn't tell you anything about I'll just be like, what? I have these like flashes, but I can't remember it. I just remember it as this just sort of like hazy grayish blue. So for me, that was just really my strong choice. And then every once in a while, there'll be like a bold color within the blue or the orange to try to highlight something specific. But most of it's done in just these very soft tones to just give that hazy feeling where we can't really remember quite exactly how things were, what order it happened.
Well, I think some of the most impressive parts of the book is where you use the page turn very effectively. Page turns are something I really love in comics, and it's something that I try to use in my work. Because that's the page turn is where you have to turn the page. We have to physically come out and turn the page, right? And I think it's like one of the only ways you can surprise somebody in comics, right? Because if on a spread, past, present, and future are just right there side by side.
Yeah.
But you use the page turn very effectively, and more than once in your book, after the page turn, you have one color scheme invading another.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really incredible. You were very careful about keeping them apart at the beginning,
right? And
then they kind of slowly come together. So it's sort of like you're talking about like past and present coming together, right? That's kind of
and trying to sort of almost like each help each other out. If I as an adult I can like learn from my childhood, and then maybe my little baby self can also learn from my adulthood, and we can like help each other out. Be like, well, what's this crazy lady doing?
Do you feel like doing that book changed your relationship with your mom? I know your mom's not with us anymore, but do you feel like it changed anything?
Yeah, I do. It was when she died, she was at her worst, I would say. Like she really like was on like an arc like this in my life. She was like pretty okay for a while, and then just like really plummeted, and everything sort of spiraled out for the last several years. So when she died, it was almost a relief. Like, I don't want to disrespect anyone here. It was just like, it was like she was so difficult, and it was so like traumatizing to be around her. So that was like, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore. But then I was also like crushed because she was a huge figure in my life, and I felt like a bus had hit me, and that loss was also very devastating. So those were two really conflicting feelings. It was very difficult to like understand like what I was supposed to feel. And in working on the book, it wasn't really until the end when I like figured out the end, because I do write in a non-Gene Yang way. Like I was like, I don't know how this is going to end. Was just really to figure out that I can have both of those feelings, and to acknowledge that she was great in a lot of ways, like in so many ways that like I can't possibly explain how thankful I am for. And then also these ways that still affect me negatively like every day. And that she just was this lady trying to do her best. And that's really what we're all doing. And so that really helped me kind of just be okay with just that it was just going to live in limbo, and that's okay. And that made it a lot easier. But also, it's easy if they're not here, because it's like, don't tell me what to do. So I can write any book I want. Yeah.
So I do want to leave some time for question and answer, but I want to end with a couple of things. Number one is I have a theory of Briana Loewinsohn, and I feel like it's been confirmed by this conversation that we had. So you ready? Here's my theory of Briana Loewinsohn.
I have consumption. You can tell me.
Yeah.
I've got it.
Yeah, I think of you as somebody who maybe lives with one foot in disorder or chaos and one foot in order. And you're somebody who is very talented at bringing things from one side to the other. And I think you can see that with the way you write, right? You write by putting up a salad. I think it's not really a salad. I think it's a jumble. I think it's a giant jumble of ideas. And then it ends in this beautifully organized book. And I think you do that in your classroom as well. I think that the kids come in. The kids come in very loud, very disorganized. And then the projects that you get out of them are sort of organized. And I think even the purpose of this book, it seems like you had a storm of feelings inside of you about your mom, and it ends in this very beautiful and ordered and organized way. It's almost like what you would do with the garden, right? The garden metaphor, I think, works very well, because plants by themselves are wild, and then you're organizing them by putting into a garden. So that's my theory of Briana Loewinsohn.
Gene Yang, ladies and gentlemen. No, thank you so much. That is such a kind way to phrase whatever's happening here.
Yeah. So the last thing I want to touch on is the actual physical bookmaking. So and I think that's super important nowadays. Because we're surrounded by screens, right? We're surrounded by bits. We're surrounded by digital information. And you landed with a publisher called Fantagraphics, for people who are not comic book nerds, you may not know that Fantagraphics is probably like the premier publisher in American independent
No
publishing.
big deal, you guys. No, they're really great. Their work they do is just so beautiful, and they've all been so nice.
Yeah. And I think all of American publishing now is moving to a point where like we're thinking about the book as an art object now, right? As a way of like sort of counteracting digital media.
Right.
But Fantagraphics was there decades before anybody else. Like they cared about the tooth of the paper, they cared about the like the color of the ink, they cared about all of that stuff. And I think Ephemera is like a prime example of what Fantagraphics does well.
Yeah, I had when I was looking for someone to publish it, because I was like, I will not publish this myself, because everything else I had made, I'd like copied and stapled and like put together myself. And I was like, it's not gonna happen. So when I was looking for publishers, I shopped it around to a bunch of places, and I had a couple offers, which was like very, very humbling and exciting. But the reason I chose Fantagraphics was because it's like they're just gonna do such a good job. I just knew that it would look so beautiful.
So what sort of input did you have in the actual physical presentation?
So I mean, I made the book. No, just kidding. I didn't pick the paper. That was someone chose the paper. Regarding the cover, they were like, you could design the cover. We can design it for you. So I made like a bunch of ideas, and then this other lady gave a bunch of a designer named Kayla. She was super great. She came up with a bunch of ideas, and what she had done was she basically took art from the book and then created covers out of that. And so the cover that we ended up with was, has flashed at some point, is a drawing from a scene in a blackberry bush. And so like I redrew it for the cover because I was like, it killed me the idea that it was just taking art from the inside, because I want like every single part of it to be individual and not reused at all. So I redrew the cover to be individual, and it like wraps around, and then it's like symmetrical. So she came up with that symmetrical thing and the placing of the text, and it was very beautiful. I didn't know that they were going to emboss the cover, which is just like very nice.
I see.
Yeah,
that was just Fantagraphics.
They were just like those little. They did not ask. They just.
It's amazing.
I just got the book and I was like, whoa. I did ask to do the end pages. That was like a thing where I was like, can I design my own end pages, and can they each be different? And can they like? They were like, yeah, that sounds fun. They were just like, my editor was like, everything I would send him was like, okay, I have some pages for you. And he's like, great, I love it. And I was like, okay, like, do you have any notes? He's like, I love it all. He was just like the nicest guy. It was great. It was so nice.
So you're a fan of Fantagraphics.
Yeah, great. Yeah, they're really nice.
That's awesome. It's sort of like meeting your favorite celebrity and finding out that they're actually a really nice person, right? You dream of working for Fantagraphics, and then when you do,
I know. Awesome. It is sort of shocking. Yeah. You guys, Gene Yang is so nice. Like when you get to meet him later, you'll be like, I can't believe he's actually the nicest guy.
So when you read this book, I think there is, because there are not that many words on every page. I think intentionally there is a temptation to read it quickly, and I hope you won't do that. Because there's so much thought put into everything from the colors on the page to the tooth of the paper, to even like the end pages and the font that's used, all of it is very, very intentional, in part because it's a Fantagraphics book, and in part because it's made by a lady who is good at bringing order out of chaos.
Lazy at some things and super not lazy at other things.
All right, well, I'd like us to give a round of applause to Ephemera and to
with me today.
Yeah, we're not done.
Give a round of applause to this guy.
Does anyone have any questions for Briana Loewinsohn?
Do you know how your mother committed suicide?
Oh, I love that question. Very bold. Well, I don't. It's kind of a crazy story. Can I tell? Like, it's like a little bit of a weird story. It's like a little bit of a ghost tale. Do you want to hear it?
We're here for weird stories.
Okay. My whole life, my mother had a little, like, wooden calendar that you could hand change the date. And she had it on the wall my whole life. You ready?
Yeah.
And it was always my birthday. And my birthday is also spooky. It's Halloween. So it was always set to October 31st my whole life. And then on the day that we found her, no longer alive, it had been changed to that date. And I was like, whoa, I thought that, because at first I thought, oh, because she had a lot of health issues. So at first we thought maybe it was just health issues. There's, I'm not going to say like what I think she did, because you are too young, but that is when I was like, oh, this was a premeditated situation. And it was such a weird like way to leave a calling card without leaving a calling card. She didn't leave a letter, she didn't tell me anything, she didn't clean anything up, like nothing, but it was just this one little date had changed. I was like, all right, I see it. Isn't that interesting? A little bit spooky. Thank you for asking that. Very bold.
Any other questions?
I know the answer to this, but I wanted to, I missed it. So, Briana, what's next?
Oh!
I was going to end on that, dude. Good. Way to spoil. That was going to be the last question into the mic. But that's cool. Go ahead.
I think you missed it, but okay.
Mom and Dad are fighting. I don't know what. I do have another book I'm working on. I'm very excited to say that Fantagraphics is going to be publishing it. Yay! This is a totally different book. It's also a memoir, because I guess I'm into that now. But it is much more realistic to my life. It's set in the mid-90s in high school. So some people in this audience are featured in the book. And it's all told through notes. Did anyone write notes when they were in high school and like fold them up into crazy ways? Well, I did, and I saved all of my notes. So I have hundreds of notes from high school. Get into it. It's so fun. You write a note, and then you fold it up in a crazy way, and you pass it to your friend, and then they read the note, and then later they write you a note. And it's very fun. You should write them and save them. So I have this like crazy record of like all the things that we said. I also used to print out emails in like the very early 90s, because I was like, I'm gonna need these.
How's that going for you? Have you needed them?
Well, I do now.
So you were right.
Like I saved a fight between me and some girl, and I'm like, what are we fighting about? Like, I don't even understand, but it's so good. So it's going to be set in the 90s, and this one is much more like I'm like drawing people I knew, the houses are what I looked like, and it's called Raised by Ghosts. And it's sort of just about all the people and things that raise you and their ephemeral qualities. I'm really into things that don't last, because I already miss you guys. So yeah, so that's my next book, and hopefully I'll get it done soon.
That sounds great. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
You mentioned that when you're talking about your process, that sometimes you just be like at the desk for a really long time trying to sort something at various points in your day. When you would get stuck in that way, like would you talk it out with people, or what was your process there? Because obviously this is a very personal story. So.
Yeah, I'm pretty open, as you might be able to tell from this interview. So I do talk it out a lot. I worked on the book primarily during the pandemic with my good friend Tin Pham, who's standing back there. Raise your hand, Tin Pham. He and we both teach together at Bishop O'Dowd High School, and during the pandemic, when we were remote, we would teach our classes from our classrooms and then come back, and he also has a book coming out on June 20th called Family Style. You should buy it. And so it was really great. It was like being in like a very, very small and not very smart think tank, where we would just like go back and forth and like talk about our books and get ideas. And it was cool because our books are very different in tone, but it was really fun to be working on them at the same time. So I had that. I also talked to like, my husband's had to hear about this book incessantly for a couple of years, but he takes it like a champ. So I just talked to a lot of people about it. I talk about plant stuff with my plant people. So I talked to Gene about it, just for different ideas. Story structure wise, I had sent it to a friend who's a copy editor when I first had just the basic story after I had pitched it, and I was ready to pitch it, and I was like, do you think this is good? And she advised me to switch the second and third chapter, so it was going to end with the death, and that, spoilies. And then she said put that in the middle, and I was like I didn't even know you could do that. It was amazing to me. So yeah, I really advise like talking to people, and I just love having resources where I don't feel like it's okay if I mess up. So that's why I have like a sketchbook, and I have like Google Docs, and I have like I just have like everything where I can like just like get my bad ideas out. Because later sometimes that might be like, oh my god, that's the end of my book. I didn't realize I drew it. You know what I mean? And I'll just like stick it in. So that's what works for me, is just to like have these places where I don't feel like there's like no bad ideas, like that kind of vibe. If that answers the question.
Hi. So when reading through the book, is there any, like, the presence of anything like hidden, like objects or colors, specific things that we should look for?
There are hidden objects. That is a fun question. There is a hidden Charles Addams cartoon in it. Does anyone know Charles Addams? He created the Addams Family. He was my grandpa's best friend. And we have a comic that he made for my grandparents when they got divorced. It'll flash at some point. And so I put a tiny little piece of that because I always grew up with that in my house. So that is it hidden in there. And then there's like the jewelry that she puts on at some point is from our house. And a lot of anything on the walls, like those are paintings that my mom had. And then the plants are also, my mom had like a love-hate relationship with camellia trees, so like that comes up a lot in the book. My sibling did really fall in the blackberry bush. We lived in West Berkeley in the 80s, and our house was overgrown and no one took care of it, and there was a river or a stream that was under it, so like it was all blackberries, and my sibling decided to try to do something and just completely fell into it, and no one cared. It was like a nightmare. So that is also one of the very earlier ideas of the book. It's about this blackberry experience. So yeah, there's like lots of things like that are hidden in there. Thanks. Did you have a question? No?
Yeah. You mentioned that the main character, the young girl in your story, is based on you, but very intentionally different from you, and also your post references your daughter. So I'm wondering how you settled on the specific physical appearance that is depicted to carry with the meaning of who you are.
The little girl is modeled after a friend's kid, which was really like the very first moment that I thought of the book. Was one of the sketches in here is a little girl standing in front of some plants and her hair is blowing up, and I was watching this friend's kid go down a slide, and she's just like, she's got like these cute little like teeth, and like her little bangs were flying up, and it was just, she was just in her own element and her own vibe, and like just like so in that little kid world where it's like she's never gonna remember that moment. And that to me really sparked the whole book. Actually, was just like watching this little girl, this is it. So I sketched her while we were like on this like family vacation, and that's what made me sort of style her after that. And then I wanted the era to be more the era that my mother or grandmother would have grown up in, just to sort of like take it outside of what I know. But it's based off this like little friend. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Thank you so much.
All right, yeah. Thank you all so much. No one last question before we end? Oh, yes.
I think I've always assumed that artists are kind of born. Whenever I see somebody drawing, they just sort of do these things on this page and this thing emerges. But in a throwaway comment, you said you wanted to be an artist, and I think what you said is you didn't necessarily have that time, you sort of taught yourself. Is that really true?
Yeah. I remember as a little kid in elementary school just being like, I had this friend named Jimin Lee and this girl named Sarah Cronenberg, and they were so good at it. They just, to me, they had that, like they could just do it, and they would just draw it, and it was great. And I couldn't do it, and I had to like sit there and try. And I just feel like my whole life, and then I would be like the teenager taking the class here, and like I would still have to like try to like get to the next. And it was just like, I felt like I just had to like work like so hard. Whereas so many people, and maybe they did too secretly, but it did not come naturally to me. Like I like had to do it. I do it a lot. I do a lot of art to keep it up. Do you feel like it came naturally to you?
I used to think I did until I met other people who were way better.
That's amazing. Wow. Yeah. I bet it did.
No. I felt like I did for maybe like the first 12 years of my life, and then I met some amazing artists, and I was like, oh. No,
I know. When you meet those ones, you're like, ooh, boy.
Yeah.
Back over here.
Did you trace that? Oh, you didn't trace that?
Yeah. Did you have a question back here? Yeah.
It sounds like your relationship to art has always been very genuinely curious and like honest with yourself. As a teacher, do you find that that's something you actively encourage, or your students living in this age of the attention economy that it's hard to get them away from doing something that looks good but maybe doesn't have as much substance as your work?
My style of teaching, I'm a very hands-off teacher. I really try to give them technical skills and then encourage them to experiment. And I really just try to if I'm gonna give an assignment, I try my hardest to give an assignment that has very open-ended and has a lot of possibilities. So it might be a painting, but it's it can be anything you want, but it's an empty room and it has to focus on shadow and light, but whatever that means to you. So it can really, you can fill so many spaces with shadow and light, and assignments that let them have a lot of experimentation, however they arrive at this point is theirs, but I want to give them that jumping off point. So I try to give them just enough parameters to sort of find out what they're interested in. Did I answer that? That's what I try to do.
All right, any last questions? Well, I was going to end by asking you what's next, but Gene Pham already asked that. So let me ask this. For people who want to follow you and follow your art until your next book comes out, how would they do that?
I am on Instagram, and my Instagram is Briana Breaks, Breaks, and I put a lot of art up there all the time. It's pretty fun. So I'm working on this high school comic, and then I'm doing little supplemental art for Ephemera, while I'm doing all the promotion for it and stuff like that. So that's been pretty fun to work on. But Instagram is my only social media platform. But there's a lot of fun art on there. So. All
right, Briana Breaks on Instagram.
Gene Luen Yang on Instagram.
All right, let's give Briana Loewinsohn one more round of applause. Thank you all.
Thank you guys so much for coming out. I really appreciate it. Thank you for listening to Gene talk so much. Thank you to the bookstore for hosting this. It was just so nice and lovely. And you guys are just all so beautiful, and I'm going to miss you. I'm going to miss you tomorrow. I'm really excited about it. I'm excited about it.
All right, so you're doing a signing right now.
Okay, oh, great. That sounds
right?
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where that is.